Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show, a podcast to help you get an insider's view of the financial world and escape common investment traps. We look at the financial news of the day and help you make sense of it so you can relax about money.
Welcome back to the Investor Coaching Show. I'm Evan Barnard. So let's shift some gears. We're coming up towards the end of another year. Quite a bit has gone on. As I mentioned, we've seen a Dow cross 48,000, and it is snuck back a little bit below that. And, you know, that volatility will continue. What's been kind of interesting is seeing that Bitcoin has dropped, I won't say significantly, but it's like, 15-20%, enough that when you start to look at the press on Bitcoin, and I can't remember if it's actually gotten below 95,000 or not. I don't really pay that close of attention. But what I do pay attention to is the articles surrounding what's going on with people who are investing in Bitcoin. And so, you see record outflows now of people taking, tens of millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars, I think on one article, out of Bitcoin ETFs because of the drop. And so it just goes to show as an example that whether you're talking about Bitcoin, gold, an individual stock, even an index or the big seven, obviously we teach that you should have a diversified portfolio and not have to worry about a forecast or prediction about the future. And we're going to go into more detail on that at the start of the second hour on just, why investors struggle with getting great returns. But just the fact that, okay, when Bitcoin was going up, you see all of this money piling in. Well, what does that mean people are doing? They're buying high. And now that Bitcoin has dropped, you see people getting out, meaning they're selling low. Now, if you got in 10 years ago, fine, you might have still made a profit. But regardless of the product, I will say, because Bitcoin's not an investment, but regardless of what you're buying and selling, it's that investor behavior that tends to cause as much problem as anything. And so, it kind of begs the question because, Bitcoin was supposed to be this hedge against inflation and all this and replace the dollar or ultimately in digital currency. But people aren't behaving as if that's how they view it. They're viewing it like an investment, which I don't think it was ever intended to be. Mason, I'm curious if the folks you come in contact with, do they, obviously don't give names, any of that kind of stuff, but
yeah, of course.
Do they tend to discuss it as if that's an investment? Do they tend to discuss it as, well, that's what the cool people do, or I don't want to miss out? How do they even view some of the digital currency?
For a lot of especially crypto, a lot of the people I talk to it's an overwhelming concept. Yeah. I've had friends from high school that have gotten rich off of it. They invested right when it first came out and ended up blowing up. I have a friend who owns 3 different companies that he purchased through a couple Bitcoin that he had.
Oh, fantastic.
And he's doing really, really well for himself. I have others that are still working their way up towards it, that are still working in it. And some are like, that's too intimidating to me. It's nothing I really want to dabble in because it seems like you need to know a lot to be able to get invested in it.
Okay.
And so it's not, I know a lot of people on the different realms. Personally, I'm not, if I had an investor that told me how to do it, I would probably dive into it, but it's not something that I see myself pursuing anytime soon because it is, like I said, it is an intimidating thing just to know the right avenues to play through.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So for the record, we kind of view crypto as like crack cocaine from an investment standpoint. And so, just because you can find someone to tell you where to find the good dealer on the corner doesn't mean that's a good idea to engage in that behavior. But it's just kind of interesting of, it may turn out that someone, your friend, God bless him, made a ton of money, made a profit, but that wasn't really what Bitcoin was designed to be. And so it's just kind of become another thing. And so, we're going to have that volatility. But we keep an eye on the crypto space as the bloom comes off the rose, as we would say, we may see more dollars coming out of that category of asset. Again, I wouldn't call it an investment, but it's a something. I don't think it's going away necessarily. The technology that spun off from Bitcoin, all kinds of companies are going to end up making millions of dollars processing, transactions and so forth. So we're kind of coming up on the end of the year. Crazy week, but let's look at, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. We're going to have holidays and things like that. And this is coming out of Morningstar, article with Christine Benz and Margaret Giles. It's just a checklist for retirees to finish the year off. So when it comes to portfolio and financial plan maintenance, I believe that a good once annual review is plenty, providing the opportunity to rebalance, attend to tax matters, and required minimum distributions and so forth. And so let's talk about, this has been a pretty good year investment-wise, to the extent you had any equities in your portfolio, not so much if, you're all cash or all, fixed income. But, international markets across the board are up around 35-ish plus %. U.S. markets are up anywhere from like 12 to maybe 18, 20 or so. So it's been a really great year investment return-wise, typically, if you've got equities in your portfolio. So you want to look at that and say, we still hear this 4% number a lot of times that's been poo-pooed over the years. We still think that's frankly a little bit low if you have a very well-diversified portfolio. But 4% is a common number that you hear as a guideline. So if you look at your normal spending and, let's just say that, let's say that you have $500,000 in your IRA, just to give it a number. And you usually take out $25,000 a year to supplement your Social Security or pension, and that would be 5%. It's where that number is coming from. You take out 5% of your IRA. Well, if your account has grown 15%, you've kind of replaced 3 potential years of distributions. Obviously, it can go back down. But look at what your portfolio is doing. Look at your spending and maybe have some planning around, hey, we might withdraw 6.5% this year from the portfolio. And this is, 2026 will be the year that we take this extra vacation or something like that. There's been plenty of research that shows you can spend, and I wish I had the article in front of me. It's been a while since I've seen the report. But basically, in up years, you could increase your spending by about 15%, as long as in down years, you reduce your spending by 10%. And so it doesn't mean you totally cut yourself off, but just pay attention to how much your portfolio has grown. And it may be that your portfolio grew, but your expenses grew too, and you're still at 5%. It's just a much higher number. But it's a good time to be looking at that and kind of look at that in the context of your budget. There was some 2024 research that they found that depending on your time horizon, if you're 75, you may not think I have 30 years left, which is probably likely. But, if you're only looking at a 15-year horizon to have on your portfolio, you could probably take out 7% a year and still be safe, as long as it's a very well, diversified portfolio. But the key is just pay attention to it. Don't just automatically take the same thing out year after year. Look at how the return was. Look at your spending and adjust accordingly. Assess your total portfolio's asset allocation. There's plenty of tools out there. Heaven forbid you call us, and we can x-ray it for you and just kind of see what's going on in the portfolio. But it's a good time to be looking at your 401ks. And if you have an allocation that you've built, chances are it's out of balance unless there's an auto rebalance feature in there. A lot of times we're seeing that more and more in 401k chassis. But look, chances are if you have international, that percentage is probably higher than what your target was. Just go in there and rebalance the portfolio And if you've come up on maybe a milestone birthday, or you hit, that, hey, I'm going to be retiring in 2 years or something like that, you may actually look at changing the allocation itself and increasing the amount of fixed income, decreasing the amount of stocks, and you may keep it the same. Just depends. But the point is, look at that and see what the allocation is and see if it needs to be rebalanced. This is particularly for people over 73. Make sure that you get your required minimum distribution out of your IRA or 401k in time if you're no longer employed, not an employer, 5% owner of the business. Make sure you get your RMD. And it's interesting. We've ran into a couple of situations. And so, there's several tables out there to calculate your required minimum distribution. The standard table that most people use, I think it's called Table 2, it assumes that you are married to someone that is 10 years younger than you. And so, I'm 62, but if I was, say, 75, it assumes that my wife is 65. Whether she's this, older than me or not, it assumes that we've got this joint life expectancy. And so that's the most common table that people use. But there is a separate table. We see this a lot in second marriages, where if your spouse is more than 10 years younger than you and you happen to be over 73, there's a different table for you to use that doesn't require that you take out quite as much money, because the government wants to provide for your spouse and make sure that lasts through their life expectancy. When you inherit an IRA, there's a different table that's based on your life, and then you just reduce it each year by 1. You don't have to you don't recalculate it. You just drop that by 1. So there's several tables, and just a lot of times, the reason I'm bringing this up is most of the custodians out there, they send out this annual letter and so forth. Most of the time, those letters are based on Table 2. And it could be that you may just, if you double check, you may not have to take out as much as that letter, just because they don't know that your spouse is, 14 years younger than you or something like that. So just pay attention to that. And anytime I'm talking about required minimum distributions, I cannot leave the topic without talking about qualified charitable distributions, QCDs. I think even Paul's been doing the spot for the Nashville Rescue Mission, and that's next not this Monday, but next Monday, Mason.
I believe so. I'll have to check on that, but I believe so.
If you happen to have a required distribution that you haven't gotten out yet, you could do a qualified charitable distribution to the Nashville Rescue Mission that comes out tax-free out of your IRA. And then you still, qualify for your full standard deduction and all that kind of stuff. You just have to make sure that distribution is processed properly and, made out to the charity and so forth. But that helps satisfy your RMD, and that's just a great tool. We just love that. Love that one. And you may have, let's say, you're not in required minimum distribution age. But as I mentioned, it's been a pretty good year market-wise. And if you have some non-qualified assets, meaning, like after-tax money, a regular brokerage account, mutual funds in a non-qualified account, so forth, you could always just gift shares of that stock or that mutual fund if it's a client of ours mutual fund, because we don't believe in individual stocks. But if we haven't converted you yet and you have a stock that's appreciated in value, you could donate that to the charity. You get the full value of the gift, and the charity, of course, doesn't pay any tax, and so it's better than you selling the stock, paying capital gains, and then writing a check to the charity. So it's a good time to just kind of revisit some of the year-end giving. A lot of times we have clients in retirement, particularly, not so much when you're still working, but they'll kind of keep, hey, I want to keep a year's worth, my next year's spending in cash, and then, let the portfolio do its thing. And depending on how your spending has gone this year, might want to revisit that and see if you need to take a distribution to top off your cash reserve. See if you need to revisit that. Just make sure you don't get, caught out on any of that kind of stuff. So just some basic things to look at. Always, it's a good time of year to review beneficiary designations. I was actually had a conversation with my dad, who lives up in Indianapolis, used to live down here. And so he still has a couple of accounts down here at some banks. And he's, recently turned 90. And he had called and, he couldn't remember if we had beneficiary designations on those accounts. And so, we wanted to check on it. And that was encouraging or exciting for me that here he is still paying attention to those things. And so, it's a good time of year to just check on those things and begin reflecting on what you've maybe been putting off. You have 6 weeks to maybe cross a couple things off if you haven't gotten a will. We'll talk about that next hour as well, of the percentage of people that still don't have wills in this country. And if it's one of you, don't shake your head, don't feel guilty, but we'll encourage you to get that taken care of for sure, so that you don't leave your heirs high and dry. So, it's good year-end time. Just, check your stuff, allocate, check your tax situation, and enjoy. Get all those things crossed off so that you can just enjoy family and friends coming in for the holidays.
Hey, this is Paul Winkler. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Investor Coaching Show. If you want to learn more about what we do, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. Until next time, I'm Paul Winkler, reminding you that I believe that more educated investors are more confident investors, and confident investors are more successful investors. Have a great one. Advisory services offered through Paul Winkler, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Paul Winkler, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation.